everyone to Behind the Incident. I have the big pleasure to be interviewing Black, or otherwise known as BlakDayz, fellow goon from DEFCON. Welcome to the show, Black. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. My name is Black. As you said, I'm a retired goon at DEFCON. I spend my day-to-days as a senior penetration tester for a global penetration testing firm, where I founded the North American Incident Response Division for that company, and it's a pleasure to be here. So,
Welcome.
thanks.
So, just a little bit of a background how the two of us met one evening. Black interviewed me for a position at his company. Probably one of the most fun interviews that I've ever had. Most intense. I mean, usually it's a let's get to know each other. This was a full on forensics interview on technical things. And I must say, I thoroughly enjoyed our hour and a half together.
Yeah, no, it was a wonderful interview. You did quite well. So I really appreciate the time you spent. You know, it's not an easy process to go through, and you did it like a champ. So awesome.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit how you got into DFIR Black. It's not an easy industry to break into. I mean, I broke into it from an administrative job, fiddling around on networks I probably shouldn't have had, being young, being stupid, and I got given a chance at a government institution. So lucky for me, but how did you get into it?
Yeah, so my journey started a long time ago, pretty much in the late 80s. I was the phone freaker. And I kind of went through the growing pains with that scene at that time. You know, always hanging out on the DEFCON voice bridge, 801-855-3326, right? Do not accept collect calls. Remember that number like the back of my hand. It was a wonderful time, but as things waned on and as sort of the computer industry developed, um, when 9/11 occurred, you were no longer a hacker, you were a cyber terrorist. They had secret laws and secret courts. And I kind of made the decision to go into electronic warfare research and development in the Air Force for a number of years. After I got out of the Air Force, the industry still hadn't really started. So I went to be a software developer in Baton Rouge, which is my hometown. And I worked for a Fortune 100 corporation until some stock market issues hit. And I had a buddy who worked for a small boutique firm out of San Francisco who basically said, hey, we have an office in Austin. Why don't you come interview with us? And I did, and kind of got picked up there as a security consultant. But during that time of being a software developer, I was asked by who's now a district court judge in Louisiana about some specifics of a case where their expert had backed out. And so I drove like 4.5 hours to go meet her regarding this case, and we looked at the specifics. And because of the fundamental understandings that I have about the technologies at play, I was able to go through adversarial certification as an expert. And I went on, got my GCFE, and became one of the preeminent forensics experts in the state of Louisiana in both criminal and civil court. So I was kind of doing that while I was doing software development. And then when I started at the boutique that I joined, we had a customer who owned an entire floor of a hotel in New York who had an incident, and we worked security for the corporation that he originally founded. And he asked us, and so our senior vice president of consulting knew that I was a forensics expert. So he had me go handle the incident. And then as those started to roll in more and more, as our reputation grew, we started handling more and more until he said, hey, look, would you devote a few years of being here to help build out this practice and to train and teach others and kind of build it on your shoulders? And I did that. And it was a wonderful journey. It's been a journey. Handled some crazy stuff, seen some crazy stuff. A little bit I think we're going to talk about tonight from both the corporate side and then kind of from the one-off oddball things. I think I have a couple incidents that we can discuss without getting into too many specifics. So that's kind of how I got started and just where I'm at. And yeah.
very interesting. It's very similar. I think I started and then I was very, very fortunate to get a awesome mentor that guided me in the right direction. Now, we have seen that the term hacker is often to not used as a bad, malicious word. Um, Now, I like to always say to people, yes, but it, if you ask the question, are all drug dealers criminals? The answer would be no, because a pharmacist is technically a dealer of drugs. Therefore,
Exactly. There are professional criminals.
yes, so I always say
You
it's
want to
the
do things like that.
it's the intent that you use the action with. So I think that's a term that we need to all take back and make it true to what it used to be, because I think it's been bastardized and made to be this bad, bad, bad thing.
Yeah, so where the hacker where the whole phrase comes from is the MIT Train Club, right? Where they had like these analog cables underneath their train track, and they came up with this digital signaling technology, and they kind of gave the shit job of chopping out the cables and putting in the new cables to a scheduled list. If I remember correctly, it was like people who kind of didn't pay their dues, or maybe had added a lot to the club, and so it's kind of like this crap job. They just went in and removed the inefficiencies and replaced it with a more efficient system so that the design could still operate, right? And that person was called a hacker. Then, as we progressed through time, I think it was Greensplat and Gosper, and like the PDP-10s, as you start to move through sort of the hacker history, hacker sorts of fades away sometime in the late 70s. In the 80s, you started dealing with people who hacked phone systems, phone freaks. But, it was a terminal at the end, uses digital signal processor, at the time analog signal processing, depending on the type of switch you're at. But the idea was you were still manipulating a system so that it would do your will in a more efficient manner while still operating. There weren't really laws per se. I mean, there were wire fraud and stuff like that, but there weren't really laws per se about, fiddling around with those networks. And it was very interesting because as Louis Freeh, who is the director of the FBI here in the 90s, he hunted a good few of us. A lot of people forget this. He started back with the whole hackers are the greatest scourge the 21st century has not yet seen. Right or wrong, hey. But, he wanted to suspend First Amendment rights to make it so we could share information. He definitely prosecuted and performed investigations in such a zealous fashion that I will never forget his name. And, it's a connotation that he basically, through the media at the time, sort of applied this negative influence to. Here in America, with the recent election, it's much like General McCarthyism, right? Where you just apply this label and just rinse and repeat. And they say, well, hackers stole an election, hackers did it. None of that's actually true. Misinformation campaigns and all this, that's not hackers, right? Revealing what people wrote is the job of journalists, right? The hackers are, it has nothing to do with the situation. Like, people did bad stuff. It came to light through their emails because they had poor security. And people say, oh, hackers stole the election. I'm like, hey, okay, whatever. But it adds to the connotation. We fought from Louis Freeh to 2016 to make information security and information security professionals who are professional hackers less stigmatized. Yes. And all the media did in 2016 was kind of wrap that up, throw it out the window, and apply the stigma, reapply, I guess you could say, the stigma. So I've seen it before. I've seen it. The fact is that being a hacker doesn't. It's who you are. It's your personality. It's removed. It's the nature of wanting to remove inefficiencies. Smartphones don't naturally get smarter. TVs don't naturally get bigger. Hard drives don't naturally get larger. Networks don't naturally get faster. Things don't get naturally more secure. It takes people to go in and figure out what those inefficiencies are, identify them, remediate them, and then ultimately, as sort of the point of your blog, defend them. So some of the best defenders are the people who can perform the actions. And, whatever the media says, I would say real hackers aren't the ones you read about. They're the ones you drink with. So I think that's just kind of something to keep in mind at all times. That the industry is what you make it, the community is what you make it, and that's trying to move away. You can try to move away from the media term hacker. I mean, like I said, I spent the better part of 20 years doing it, and they'll rinse and repeat it back right at you. So the best thing to do is do good work, do good actions, and have fun along the way. I mean, it's an unregulated sort of industry, and we're at the beginning of it. And I always say, enjoy the Wolf of Wall Street years, because one day we'll tell people about them. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. So DEFCON's coming up. That's around the corner. Any advice for noobs or new people going? Everyone,
Yeah.
So my first DEFCON was quite the experience. I got the distinct pleasure to work. Was a hard work, but I also learned that DEFCON is probably not such a scary place as everyone leads you to believe in. Obviously, as far as I heard, DEFCON's cancelled again this year.
Yeah, it sucks. I mean, I know people had rooms and flights and everything, but I hear the bar at Bally's is going to be a great place to be. The talks at DEFCON are free, canceled or not. They'll be online. LineCon's a great place to meet people. BarCon's a better place to talk. Definitely go see the talks that you want to go see. There's a DEFCON 101 fact that is worth reading. The 3-2-1 rule. Please, for the love of God, follow it for you and your fellow humans. I'm a rabid individualist, but I do believe that we have to exist together. So washing yourself, feeding yourself, and sleeping a little bit goes a long way in doing that. The best thing I can say about DEFCON is it is what you make it. So, I was part of the security team there for a very long time, and for whatever you hear, whatever you do, just remember it's what you make it. You are in Vegas, right? Personal security is a thing. Never leave your drink unattended. Mind you, they don't serve drinks in the conference area during the conference. It's outside of the conference area. So when you're at a bar in Vegas in a hotel, practice personal security like you're in a bar in Vegas in a hotel. All of those same security elements from a personal security standpoint stand true. If you ever feel you're threatened or in need, definitely contact the local police, contact the hotel, contact DEFCON staff. Feel free to reach out. The goons are a very diverse group of people, as you know. And so never feel like you can't speak to staff, because in my entire time being there, for anything that was brought up, it was always outside of the DEFCON venue itself, and it was reported. Because we did handle a lot of stuff, but there's really not too much I can really speak to going more about that. But it's really a place that you can feel at home and feel safe, but definitely practice personal security while you're in Las Vegas, heavily drinking for days on end with other people who are doing so. It's Vegas, so.
No, definitely. So let's chat a little bit about some incidents that you've worked on. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of our conversation now. So what would be the one event or incident that took place that made you shake your head and go, I cannot believe this is happening? Am I in a twilight zone? I'll
give you an oddball one. So in the middle of an incident, we have an executive come in and say that his secretary had received something very ominous in her mailbox. And I actually have photos of this. I can't share them, but there's a manila envelope, and there was a WWE wrestler taped along the back, and it is something the Heart, Hitman Heart or something. It was some blonde-haired 1990s, 2000 WWE guy, and he's got his arms in the air and his black leotard shorts on, and he's just like cut out of a magazine and taped to the back of this manila envelope. The manila envelope, he flipped it over, had no postage. It was addressed to the recipient, the secretary, and it was the block lettering of her name and address, and it was filled in twice, like the ink pen went over it twice. And of course, immediately they bring you this thing, and you're like looking for nitrile gloves, a pair of tweezers, and an evidence bag, because you don't know what's quite going on. And you pull it out, and there was a slip of paper wrapped around a USB drive. And that slip of paper had I don't know how to put it, it was ink, very good art. It was very good ink art on this notepad piece of paper. And it was this very solemn black cat, and it was like a nightscape. And it had this poetry that was very mundane. I'd say mundane. It's very
somber.
Yeah, it's very sombering. And it was basically a love lost type thing. And there was this other cat drifting away on a piece of wood. And there was like a river Styx sort of motif to it. And then there was a USB drive in the middle of this. And on the USB drive, there was artwork of film noir style bondage of Snow White, but 35 millimeter film clips. So these were 35 millimeter frames scanned in from a scanner. It's not accepted and all that. It was somebody actually filmed this and then put each frame into an image for about 2 gigs of images of this very weird sort of scene, and this wolf and this bonded up person on a bed, Snow White, all this. And it was definitely not something from the internet, or not something we've ever seen. And there was a bunch of other sort of imagery on there that was very grotesque. Things that we immediately kind of notified the police, saying, no postage, this person's in physical contact. But then, we did a file recovery on the drive to figure out USB drives are kind of unique in the sense that people pass them around. And, I have a box of them. I don't know what's on the unallocated space. Like, I asked somebody for a USB disk once, never gave it back. Bam, new owner of the USB disk, a little drive. And so we do this, and it turns out that this drive has images of school children attending a museum, and it was for an English class. And at the same time, we had open source intelligence going on the person who was the recipient of this device. And they had detected that she had liked a page of an individual that was also contained in one of the photos from the drive. And that person was part of a band. And it turns out that that person was her best friend's husband. And so there was this huge police investigation. There was maybe $20,000 worth of forensics done. There was all this open source intelligence performed to find out that this guy was just really creepy and had the best he could, for whatever it's worth, put these images and imagery and all this stuff together, and then thought it was going to tape like a WWE star to the back of the envelope, and then plug it into her mailbox physically. And what's bad is her boss was the one who issued the investigation, so he's the one that received the report. And then it comes out that this guy was just being a creep. So it was honestly one of the things where I it's like, I wish the police report was cataloged, and I'll always remember it. If I ever see something on Forensic Files one day where they're like, for some reason there was a WWE star taped to the back of the whatever, I'll be like, oh, I know who that is. That's just really creepy. But I mean, that's an oddball one-off sort of thing that came along during a standard incident response. But it really goes to show the difference between forensics investigation with the digital component, where you apply a bunch of different methodologies to figure out and get data points in order to establish a narrative that fits the evidence as provided. So that is more of a forensics and digital forensics endeavor. And then what you now have today is this DFIR sort of spectrum, right? Where you have incident response and digital forensics paired together. And, they do mix. I mean, they definitely meet at a point, but they are uniquely different. Yes. And you may find people who are really good at digital forensics who suck at incident response. You may find people who are great at incident response that really can't do forensics, or have a fundamental understanding. Then you have disk forensics, which is what a lot of people equate forensics to. And you have network forensics, which is a lot of SOC individuals relate forensics to. And then you have memory forensics, which is what a lot of people use endpoint sort of discovery and prevention IDS, systems generally think of. But you end up with this sort of an amalgamation of a bunch of people who all have a shared responsibility, differentiating skill sets, and this diverse ecosystem where things don't often quite add up. So digital forensics is a little bit of a unicorn to find people who are good at incident response, good at forensics, and then ultimately what we look for, where I work, is somebody who's good, at it kind of holistically, because they understand the penetration side. They understand what it's like to be the threat actor, and that's really kind of the secret sauce. Is knowing exactly not only when somebody's in your network, what they're going to go after, how to locate them, how to find them, develop the IOCs, and sort of do this threat hunting exercise, but ultimately to understand, what their methodologies are. What are they doing? How are they capturing this? How are they moving? How are they moving laterally? How are they, are they capturing hashes from memory? Like, what just kind of understanding, exactly how the traditional model of an attacker works from a phishing standpoint. No matter how it happens, that post-exploitation standard method of operation is pretty much the same, and when it varies, it is noticeable. So you hear a lot of people talk about like APT and all this other sort of buzzwordy stuff at threat actors, when in the end it's kind of shitty malware. Let's just be honest, right? Like the other day on Twitter, I posted a thing about the Joshua Iranian hacking tool. The thing has like multiple vulnerabilities for DLL hijacking. Like, these tools are kind of shittily written, right? Like, we're not talking about if it was a nation state. Yeah, that's generally the lowest bidder by somebody who can get a private market job, who's looking to just get through, gets trained, and gets brought up. So I found that in my experience, either high-level espionage campaigns are generally as or under sophisticated as privately funded, privately operated campaigns are. Some of the most entertaining malware, and that was going to be one of the other things I was going to speak with you about, is something that I've never seen before. I've never seen the acuteness of the actors, their understanding of the infrastructure, like how they performed, what they did. Never seen it, haven't heard of it since. Somebody may watch this. I want to post in the comments, what threat actor you think this is, because at this moment, I personally have never seen anybody sort of use this command and control method before. It's an adaptation of human intelligence style of drop boxes or just dead drops. But this one's a little bit more sophisticated in it. So, I guess we'll talk about that in a sec. But going back to your original point, digital forensics and IR is something that's, sort of a new forefront for us.
It's a very exciting time. But you are right. I do like the fact of having red team, blue team experience when doing DFIR. I think it gives you a unique perspective of understanding what's happening. And one thing that I've learned in my career is you need to know the known. Need to know what is normal on a network or on a machine to identify the abnormalities. That's a big thing. People don't realize that you can look at someone's machine and you can effectively fingerprint it and how they save their files, how they access folders or transfers. By using shell bags, you can look at those things. You can literally learn the personality behind someone by looking at their machines.
Yeah, it's very interesting in a forensics perspective. So sometimes I deal a lot with like child crime cases here in the U.S. And there are some cases where somebody downloads a torrent that may have 167,000 valid images that are normal adult images, and there may be 10 identifiable under the age of 17 images. The individual cancels the torrent. At one case where the guy was downloading Marvel movies in sequence, we were able to build, because he was using IE, we were able to build his URL history and timing and see his actual download times and tie that in and see him canceling the torrent because it wasn't torrent Marvel movies, which is what he clicked on. The actual torrent name was a Marvel movie pack. So he was guilty of like copyright infringement. But he canceled it, but a tracker had picked up that he had began the transfer and ended up raiding his house, and we rebuilt the entire timeline by the second of what he was doing and what his intent was. And that's one of the things is when you look at a computer system, you can see what a normal user behavior is. You can determine. I call it a behavioral analysis for a usage pattern or usage pattern analysis. And you can also determine whether or not somebody used an anti-forensics tool, right? Like if somebody goes in and uses C cleaner and wipes out, all the shell bags, and you go, let's say they're smart enough to like delete everything from the shadow copy. It's one of those things like, you can say, hey, look, my father was a detective, and he would always say, when you're at a murder scene, don't look for blood, look for bleach. You can see that interruption of usage pattern. You can see that interruption of materials. And so that's one of the ways that you can identify. You can say, look, I don't know what necessarily, you may not know what was used or how it was done, but you can say, look, for 7 years we have usage, and then all of a sudden from a certain date to a certain date, we have some types of activity, maybe disk activity or other activity, but we don't have these particular artifacts. And so you can see that there was some sort of anti-forensics operation done. And there are ways to recover. So one of the things is understand the system that you're looking at. And because things like in Windows, they do keep copies of this in areas that aren't readily accessible to traditional like CCleaner and other traditional commercial products. So, that's one of the things is anytime you have a chance to look at a data set of information, you identify a usage pattern, whether it's emails, which are interesting because they're always a two-party item, right? Somebody's always going to have the other copy. So you can have two differentiating sets and then cross them. But the idea is when you try to do a holistic usage pattern, determine what was the user, because then it helps you identify the outliers. What do they download? What do they click on? What site do they visit? What's abnormal? So same thing with C2 traffic, network forensics, sort of the same thing. And it goes back to baselining. If you're in a corporate environment, you can get a general baseline, but in the end, when you're looking at even a baseline computer, and people install things above and beyond, baselines change, and they're not done frequently. And, but it's always good to have one for reporting, just from like SOC perspective. But when it comes to being the analyst on the machine, definitely building that timeline analysis of an individual's usage is critical, and a machine isn't going to necessarily interpret that the way you would. So it definitely takes some intuition. There is a little bit of magic sauce on the part of the analyst or investigator.
Definitely. So your most interesting incident that you can share with us, what would that be?
All right. So let's go back to what I was speaking about earlier about the most impressive incident. If I ever met these people, I'd actually buy them a beer, give them a couple gold stars, like the effectiveness that they pulled it off. So I can't really tell you the client or the subsystems or anything. And if I give too many details away, people will be able to tie it together. So there was an O-Day in a processing library where people could upload stuff that would be analyzed, and that exploit would then execute some shellcode. In this case, it reached out to a GitHub server where there was a project that was later deleted after the single download, and there was a Golang binary on there that was built as an ELF binary. It was built as an ELF. And it downloaded it, executed it, deleted the item from the disk, the shellcode did. That binary communicated to Memcache servers. So Memcache is this technology that's used in web farms as a part of object persistence for caching layers so they don't hit the database too heavily. It's open authentication, so it should never be exposed to the internet. And what these individuals did is they went through and cataloged a bunch of open Memcache servers on the internet. The malware then requested a certain slab identifier that was a globally unique identifier. And if that slab was present, it would continue to operate. If it was not present, it would just delete itself. So once it identified that that slab was present, it inserted a slab into the Memcache interface that whoever was the command and controller somewhere else on the internet would make a request because they knew what the GUID was. It was hard-coded. They knew what the GUID was going to be. So they just sit there and pull that memcache server. And there was a list of these memcache servers. But they would pull that one memcache server repetitively until they saw that slab identifier. They would then read basically the beginning of a Diffie-Hellman key exchange where they established this AES-256 symmetric key, and it would renegotiate every 15 minutes through the same mechanism. And the malware would then perform sort of a loop on the memcache server, requesting slab identifiers from a certain order of identifiers. So it was all hard-coded on client. And when it hit one of those identifiers, it would execute whatever the command was on the shell. So there was not one single mistyped command. It knew the internal server names were randomized. So there was some element. This is somewhat of an open source project, but what this thing did was basically scrape the interior collection systems of this platform for a very specific list of a few hundred clients that were very targeted. And then it downloaded all of their history of all their communications internally through these systems. And then on the server that was doing this, they actually grepped through looking for like secret key, password, all these different secrets, sort of relevant things, and then exported all that, b-zipped it up, and then pushed it to a foreign endpoint. And then it deleted itself. The C2 deleted the key. The GitHub was deleted, and the file was SCP'd off to this server in a country that you'll never get to without a war. And just like that, the communications for hundreds of people were gone, or hundreds of organizations for millions of people, really, were gone. And there was not one mistyped command. There was not one bit of recon. Like, there was no reconnaissance. And there were no other agents. Nobody had done recon. So either they had a mechanism to duplicate, because the way these systems work is they were massively deployable and would generate the same sorts of naming conventions. So either they had an idea of what that naming convention would be based on them running the same infrastructure, and they executed this attack on their own copy of what was running. And then at execution time, though, it was smash and grab using memcache servers as a C2 mechanism. And I've never seen, to this day, a piece of malware. And it's using all these misconfigured memcache servers sitting out on the internet. So they don't own them. Nobody owns them. Nobody's recording who accesses this. There is no real logging into memcache. There's no, like, log. I mean, that would kind of be antithetical to the purposes of a high-speed caching system. So they really abuse this misconfiguration out on the internet, and to this day, they've never been caught, as far as I know. So that was probably one of the most involved investigations, because it was so surgical, it was so exact. And how we got the piece of malware was, because we were able to retrieve it, is the exploit that executed the shell code still had a file handle open to a memory map segment. And so we were still able to retrieve the piece of malware that was originally downloaded, because even though it deleted the disk copy and all that, that original exploit didn't clean up after itself. And so that was a big thing in memory forensics. And there was a CVE that came out for it and all this. Yeah, that's probably one of my most sort of, I would slow clap those people who pulled that off. You know, amazing, absolutely amazing. So.
No, it sounds actually super fun, but it sounds like it's a lot like the Ukraine power grid attack, where the firmware that they ran, not one failed, and with PLC controllers, those things tend to fail.
Yeah, so I think it was like Black Energy, right?
They got in with Black Energy, and then used VPN rights of valid users to traverse and learn the systems, and then kill disk was initiated after the fact. So
yeah, so it's interesting about that is those PLCs that were used as on-off switches, if you will. They were relays. A little interesting fact about that, and don't know how accurate it is, although I know some people who were there. But the engineers, when they installed them, they were supposed to remove some of the physical relays, and they actually kept them parallel in a parallel circuit with it. So, when everything died and they bricked basically the firmware was designed, they wouldn't re-engage. Some little guy got in a truck and drove out there and flipped the switches and turned the power plant back on. So for everything they did, they went out and bought these $20,000 PLCs that only a few people had. They learned how to write the firmware and got a working version, had all this R&D that went to the back end of it. In the end, it was defeated by some old guy knowing better than to leave it all up to a computer. And he left in an analog method of reclaiming. So that's, I don't know. I think that's kind of a testament to where we're at. We're putting so much into something that's so fragile.
Exactly.
And, one day somebody's going to turn it off. And, it's good to be that old guy who has a backup plan. You might be able to save a little by thinking ahead, I guess.
No, definitely. So what I want to chat to you about as well is advice for people looking to break into DFIR. Now, I haven't found it very easy lately. I think that everyone wants someone that's got the experience and the knowledge, and people aren't giving juniors an opportunity as much as they used to when it was a little bit of an unknown field.
Yeah, so I can only speak. So one of the problems that we have is that a lot of the good candidates are outside of the United States for us, and it takes a lot with how our system works to get someone over for a role that may be junior or a little bit above junior. And so there's a lot of talent in the United States. So there's a sort of a parity bit there where you have a lot of junior people. The issue that I find is it's more or less that people focus on the actual methodologies of DFIR and do not focus on the fundamentals. And so when you start talking about maybe command and control systems that nobody's ever seen before, custom protocols, or things that just don't jive with your unless you really know what's going on and what you're doing and what you're looking at, you're not going to figure it out. So one of the problems is the experience angle, right? So there are a lot of jobs for e-discovery and SOC analysts and stuff like that, but being an actual consultant on DFIR engagements takes being part of a team that does it. And one of the problems that I've seen is the way that companies that specialize in DFIR have broken up their processes. So they have this sort of horizontal process where you take artifacts, you shove them into a pipeline. There's somebody who simply does timeline analysis of disk artifacts, and he goes into their pipeline and they process all the data and they tag it, shove it into an elk stack, and then it goes on to the next person who takes the memory sample and then performs sort of the same linear methodology and then shoves it into an elk stack. And it goes all the way through for all the different types of artifacts until it gets into a holistic response where there's some guy who's the analyst and he goes in and he picks it and he judges it. He's got 4 hours to get it done, and it's sort of this sort of commoditized branch. And if you were to get into that, you'd be sort of hold off into this. I process disk artifacts, and I look at seam events or something like that. So the consultancy side is a little bit harder in that it requires sort of a holistic understanding of knowledge just to get into it. If I were to recommend to anybody looking to get into DFIR is to learn how to be a bad guy first, learn how to be a penetration tester first, perform those actions on a VM or whatever, and then analyze that VM so you can understand and you can see what those artifacts look like. Because then you'll get off into this, well, my malware never touched disk. So you have to learn memory forensics to see what exactly does your malware look like. If you performed some Metasploit interpreter sort of combo, and what does that look like? What event logs are written? How does that look? And once you're able to start to get into understand how all of these things sort of work together and understand how the methodology of looking at something you've never seen before is done, then you're able to sit down at the table and speak with somebody who is like, somebody who's done it, and then they can recognize that. They can recognize that if there's something that you've never seen before, if you're looking at it, you understand, like, what happens if the spool service looks like this in memory, or I mean, it's one of those things where I like to talk to people about, like, what does the memory look like when certain types of malware hit? And one of the things I like to do is, just as a challenge, when people sit down for the in-person technical challenges with me, I like to give them memory samples, and then have them, even if they've never done memory forensics, sit there with them and see how they interact with me as a teammate, and then see how they perform on the samples. And some of them are actually purposefully corrupted, so that, like, the process headers aren't there, and, like, they won't get picked up by volatility or recall or anything like that. So there are some things you're going to run into that are purposefully built to see how you handle it. So I guess the kernel is to learn how to perform the actions you're investigating, perform them in a controlled environment, analyze that environment with current tool sets. I mean, it's all open source, really. And then understand how those very common things occur. Do that on different types of threats so that you can get normalized in the conversation, or normalized in the ability to converse about the subject matter intelligently. And at that point, there is a treasure trove of people, things, and places to go. But if you're going to get pigeonholed into one area and kind of work through it, as if you would, you're going to get stuck in the muck. And no offense to anybody who does everything that's required, but you're going to end up being like a sock monkey. You're just going to sit there like in an event, click, triage or escalate, and then move forward. And I mean, there's a place for people to do that, but if you want to go into the consulting world and into the unique engagement world, that's probably the best way to do it.
Well, that's some very valuable advice if I've ever heard it. I must say, I agree with you 100%. Now, it seems you like a little bit of memory forensics, so let's do Mac versus Windows versus Linux. Which one is the one that you hate the most?
Oh man, so it's got to, so hate the most. Which one gives you the most trouble? So it's got to be Linux. So one of the things that you got to look at when you're dealing with, like, volatility or things like that is you're mapping kernel C types to B type, right? And or in this case, volatility types. So you're taking small structures in memory and you're mapping it to structures that volatility or the tool understands, and those structures can change. And in Linux, they change at a very rapid rate, small incremental changes, microkernel changes. So now you have things like Lime and stuff like that pick up some of the artifacts, and some of the memory tools attempt to gather some of this information. But one of the hardest problems, like Windows, you can build a profile easily. Mac, you can get a profile. I mean, it's pretty static. Linux, there's a million different versions, microkernel versions, things like that, where if the person who collected, like, proc K-core, like, just DD'd it, if you don't have the actual kernel C types as they are, you're not going to be able to actually perform analysis functionally on it. So, sorry, my beautiful wife here is passing me my second beer.
Well, that's good. Well, it's good that you're on to your second beer. It's way too early for me to have any beer of any sort. It is 4 a.m. in the morning. So I want to talk a little bit more about DEFCON.
You're going to eat breakfast if you're committed.
I'm going to need breakfast, yes. So tell me, most memorable memory of DEFCON. If you have to think back as your days as a goon, what would you say was your highlight?
Oh, man. So a couple things on that. DEFCON is more like a hard drive formatting event for me. So you go through it, you work, and just recently I retired, but you go through it, you work, you barely sleep for a couple hours, and then you get up and you do it all again, and you get drunk afterwards and sober up and rinse and repeat. Most memorable DEFCON moment. Wow, that's a big one. Hold on one second. Let me ask. Hey, would you grab Charlie? Would you grab Charlie? Yeah. Charlie. My wife. It's my daughter's boyfriend. So my wife has been to quite a few DEFCONs with me. I don't know if I'm qualified to pick my most memorable one. All my memories are of dealing with people who are severely drunk and being assholes. So, hey Tiff, is she not coming? Most memorable DEFCON moment.
Involving me or just you?
No, just your most memorable. Like, which one would you think about me?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It has to be when you got checked and brought up the elevator.
Oh, shit.
That's a big one. That was a big one. Don't steal the radio.
Okay, alright.
Was that not what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine, alright. So I'll give it because she remembers things differently than I do.
No,
So,
I mean, there are
hey, that's good. Thanks. What? There are others, yeah, but I mean, this is going to get interesting. So my wife was a fan of vinyl for a number of years at DEFCON. Just all I need is one memorable moment.
Okay, so
You're going to have to edit this, right, Pixie?
It's fine. No, it's supposed to be a little bit quirky and different. I don't like these edited things.
Fair enough, fair enough. Yes.
It seems some good things are coming out, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is going to be the best one. I'll go ahead and we'll sum it up with this. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. There's a time, there has been. So I retired, and we're sitting at the Circle Bar at Caesars, and this guy sits down, and I guess he sits in the spot where I was playing video poker. My wife's sitting next to me, and he has this like USB fan, and it spins. It says DEFCON, and like he sets it there, leaves my spot. Hours go by, and the fan dies, and I'm going up to the sock. It's my retirement year, and so we have a lost and found there, and so I pick the fan up. I stand up, and there's some goons who are off shift, and I'm on my way there, and we stop and we talk. And we're sitting there, and all of a sudden I see this small woman with a clipboard, and I know what this is. I mean, I've seen people trespass from Caesar's property multiple times. But then this giant guy comes up. There's actually, I can't believe I'm doing this. There's actually a video of this. Thank you, baby. There's a happyretirementblack.com is the website. So you can see a video of this. So this lady walks up, and she's got this giant goons with her and whatnot. Not Hotel Caesar's property. They asked me for my ID, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? She goes, are you in possession of a USB fan? Like a personal USB fan. And I said, yeah, actually. And she goes, okay. She goes, do you have it? So I give it to her, and she goes, what were you doing with it? And so I was bringing it to Lost and Found. And she goes, okay, well, the individual on this would like to press charges. And it's a fucking USB fan. Whoever that guy is, seriously, I hope you have like a shit time at DEFCON for that. But so I tell her, I was like, hey, no, I'm headed to the Security Operations Center. You can come with me if you'd like. And she was like, so many people have lied to me at this fucking place. I've had such a terrible time with you guys. Mind you, this is like Thursday night, I think. Thursday night. So first time at the con for her. And she's the head of their security operations. And so I talked to her, and she said, look, if you can get into the Security Operations Center for DEFCON, and we can talk with whoever's there, then everything's fine. So I'm like, fucking perfect. So we go up the escalator, and if you watch the video clip of that website, there's only one thing on that website. They're getting so much mileage out of it. Auditorium. And so I'm being basically perp walked to my own sock on my retirement weekend. And of course, everybody at the bar, there's a bat phone. They've already called the sock. They know I'm coming. And I walk up into the room, and Mike's there, and he's dealing with the lady, and she realizes the kerfuffle is over nothing. And my wife, who didn't realize that I've been picked up by hotel security, is now searching for me. Of course, the goons told her where I was, so she burst into the sock screaming, where the hell have you been? What have you been doing? And I'm like, whoa, this is the head of Caesar Security, this is what's going on. And the head of Caesar Security, the lady starts laughing. And is like, well, I'm just going to leave you with her. And then at the same time, all the night shift SOC goons start playing Bad Boys. Bad Boys. What are you going to do? Like, cops? And then start singing a happy retirement black sort of cant. And there was a little shrine made up of USB fans that say, "Don't steal me, black." Like when you hit play on them, like it was only a matter of a few hours. Like people had them in a little shrine. And then I actually ran into Hatatori Hanzo, who was the one getting the mileage out of all this. And he was like, "Oh, you didn't see the website." I ran into him like a few months ago in Houston, Texas, and just randomly on the street. And then I found out that somebody had videotaped the whole encounter. So that has to be my most recent memorable one. I mean, like I said, every drunk asshole in Vegas, whether it was DEFCON attendee or not, doesn't make a difference. People who aren't attendees wander into the conference area. Things are setting up. You have to deal with a lot of stuff. I worked primarily on night shift security for a long time, so saw a bunch, dealt with a lot. I mean, there's a lot to be memorable, but not a whole lot you can really talk about. That has to be one of my most memorable moments because I got purple walked to my own sock during my retirement. That was I thought they had set it up, to be honest with you.
No, well, it's entirely possible, but I think what I remember from my first DEFCON was I was probably, as many of my SOC goon friends would say, the one that hassled them the most. I was the one stealing unicorn stuffy toys and running away with them, and being short, I get lost in a crowd fairly easily. But I feel bad, and then I would take it back and then have to deal with the consequences. But I made lifelong friends at DEFCON. Some amazing SOC goons. Major Malfunction from QM Stores, just to name one, and Priest, of course.
Priest. Yeah, it's always hard. Anytime you see Trevor Hearn, you think Priest. Anytime you see, it's funny. I have a lot of SOC goons. Are you Priest? I don't know, but hey, have you ever met Raul?
No, I have not.
You have not. So, to you and to your viewers, if you really want a special gift this DEFCON, find Raul. And he has something for you. I will make sure, I will make about 100 of them, and he will have something for you.
Perfect. Well, I might have something for you as well. With all my talks at DEFCON, I have what's called an asshole merit badge. So if you earn one for talking during my talks, you'll be handed one. In the same way.
I got bullshit flags that I'll throw. I got regulation, like National Football League flags that say bullshit on them that are sandbag. Once upon a time at DEFCON, when somebody gives a talk and they start throwing out FUD or something, people would actually heckle them off the stage, and that is long since gone. But I will purposefully interrupt you for the sake of getting a coin. You just tell me the track and the time.
Definitely. No, so I actually last year gave two very, scary talks, I've been told. One was Key to Rooting the Human Being Through Hospital Hacking, and the other one was Pwn to Own My Own Heart, pacemaker hacking, work that I've done, research that I've done. But I must say that's getting a lot better. The FDA is re-looking at some of the regulations, and we've seen some big CVEs and things registered for medical companies. So definitely moving in the right direction, finally.
That's good. I had a buddy named Barnaby who looked into a bunch of that, so it's good that you carried on his work. I really appreciate that.
Well, he's the inspiration for it because I have a pacemaker as well, and the work that he did highlighted some areas of concern. And I think one of the big things for me isn't necessarily the remote execution, but the software bugs.
Right. The potential's for error, right?
No,
things that nobody even has to exploit, things that just could go awry.
no,
Yeah.
definitely. Then just one last question before I let you go and go have another beer. What do you do to relax? What do you do to unplug from the matrix and just have 5 minutes for yourself?
Yeah, so, well, anybody that knows me, so anyone who actually hangs out or knows me knows that I'm a water guy. Like beer, bikinis, babes, boats, pools. You know, so here in Austin, that's what we do. I mean, granted, it's, you know, it gets up to I think there was a period, I think it was last year, we went for 100 days at over 110 degrees here. And there was one year, it was like 6 months of no rain and triple digits for about 4 months. So finding a water hole that they replenish, I mean, here there's natural springs, but like a pool, I like to just kind of, because in the water, you can't have technology, but you can't really have technology. And so I just kind of like to that's kind of my solace. But I do own a ranch, and I'm going to be moving back to it in about a year, where I like to like mend fences and just hang out with horses and fish and just kind of deal with chickens and get on a tractor and just kind of disconnect, grow stuff. You know, I like to grow things, peppers and different vegetables and whatnot. So just kind of like remembering that life is more than an interface and a device, that there are things to do, people to connect with, ways to connect with people, ways to experience life that doesn't involve staring at a screen. And, go for a hike. If I could tell anybody anything is, everybody kind of gets so polarized because they stare at this kind of cliched, but this black mirror, where they see themselves, identities of groups and all these things, and they stop seeing themselves as individuals, start defining themselves into further discerning groups. And just like in Cyberpunk 2020, where they talk about that as sort of being the collapse of society, we best be careful not to do so. You remember, most of the people that hate each other and argue with each other online, or that have different viewpoints, happily coexist with one another in a restaurant. They happily coexist with one another in a bar. They happily coexist with one another in the community pool, people of differing views, differing lifestyles. That day to day, as you move about, you share traffic, you share markets, you share places of worship, you share places to read, reminisce. You happily share all those spaces without any of the vitriol or any of the problems that you have. And then that brings me back to my original point, that the real hackers, the real people who are involved here, are not the ones you read about. They're not the ones that you're going to see a Wired article on. No, I mean, not to say that there haven't been Wired articles on people who are valid, or just people who are genuine hackers. But, the real hackers in the world to you are the ones you drink with, and the ones you coexist with, the ones you eat with. Hold a beer up to each person on either side of you, and just cheers with them, and just remember that you're all in this together. You all have a similar goal, and that you shouldn't disqualify anybody for any purpose based on anything other than their own merit within the space. Whether their merit as a listener, or merit as a person who's a mentor, or someone who is willing to share or consume information to further the progress of the community. That nobody should be excluded. It's not about, I believe the Hacker Manifesto said it best. We exist without skin color, race, nationality, religion. And kind of seems today that people are going the opposite of that. They're claiming on this or on that or on this or on that. And it's like, whoa, you're going in the opposite of the Hacker Manifesto. Like, I don't give a shit if you're a fucking purple unicorn. Can you hack shit? If you can't, can you learn how to? Can you show others who need help learning? Say, hey, I didn't know how to do this, and this helped me learn. I mean, there's information sharing at every level. And if we just stop focusing on some general group to belong to and start focusing on getting stuff done, we can progress. But we don't have to wait for the government to label us as something and hunt us down if we're just going to throw gas on the tires and hit the match ourselves. So I think, it's something to make sure that as we go forward, that we focus on the work at hand and not so much some group labels. Don't carry society into it. You know, that's just the thing. And understand, everybody has merit in the system, but you know, don't overestablish yours and don't contrive it. I mean, it's easily recognizable. And you know, if you do want to contribute, even as somebody who's just starting, that you can contribute. There are other people who are just starting with you who would like to hear about tips and tricks that helped you get over those initial hurdles. So, you know, it's one of those things that I think a lot of people, they try to either through bravado or something else try to claim stuff, and I don't know. It's one of those things where, you know, that's not necessary. You know, everybody's wonderful, everybody's great. I will drink with anyone. Most of us will. You know, we'll all have a good beer and talk tech and have a great evening. But when you get online, all of a sudden there's all this division. It's like, man, just go to DEFCON, have a great time, have a couple drinks, give a couple high fives, you know, and just do the damn thing, do the hell out of it, because the real hackers are the ones you're going to drink with.
No, definitely. I must say, I'm looking forward to working to a unified community and less segregated and segmented. That's one of the things that I advocate is always, you know, judge me on my technical capabilities, not on my gender, race, religion, or anything else. And that I found very, I must say, I've had only a good experience in my InfoSec journey and my DFIR journey. I've had mentors, both male and female. So I've been fortunate, but also it's your journey is what you make of it. It's not what anyone else makes of it.
It's only with yourself.
Exactly. My reaction to things is something I control, and that's something I try to focus on. But I really enjoyed our talk, and yeah, it was very interesting, and I hope to have you on. We are looking to do a type of Jeopardy play with DFIR topics.
Well, I did win Hacker Jeopardy last year, so...
Well then,
yeah, hey, well, it was me and Team Get Off My Lawn.
Was that you guys? I thought you looked familiar.
Frank Fez and Black, that's, we won Team Get Off Our Lawn.
So who knows...
It has to do with my prep game, as you can see, I'm preparing for the high points score at Hacker Jeopardy this year.
So who knows, maybe I get G-Mark to do an introduction for us of it. He is, after all, the Hacker Jeopardy master.
Oh, I would love. G-Mark and his son GM1 are great friends of mine, so absolutely.
We should do a DFR Jeopardy and host it online. I think it would be phenomenally fun.
It would be. Yeah, I'd be down for that. Thank you for having me. I really appreciated our chat.
It's a pleasure. You must have a phenomenal evening.
I will. Thank you.
Okay, cheers.